Today on the Prior Transformation, I talk about ride sharing. There's a big problem. Let's get after it. Welcome to the Prior Transformation Podcast. I'm your host, Jimmy Smoots. In this podcast, we explore, there's no we, it's just I. I'm the only person here. And really, I just ramble for 2 or 3 minutes on a technology or business topic. And occasionally, I'll interview some smart folks. If you like that kind of thing, enjoy. So I want to talk a little bit about ride sharing today. I spent the last year and a half riding Uber and Lyft pretty much exclusively every day for my commutes and just everything. It comes out to around, I think it's like $280 or so a month, which is great because parking in my place is about, I think it's $150 for parking, and then you got insurance and everything else and a car payment. It kind of works. It actually ends up working really well to just do Uber or Lyft. But the big limitation and the issue that I kind of see has to do with the quality of drivers. So, Uber is something that works really, really well, or ride sharing, I should say, broadly works really, really well when the economy isn't doing very well and there's a lot of excess labor. So it's like a lot of people who had, maybe jobs before that, during the recession and the last few years. We're unable to find work. And as soon as the employment numbers start going up, you got to imagine that Uber's talent pool starts to kind of get constrained. So what they have to do to fix that is kind of dig deeper and go further and further down, quality-wise to find, people who maybe wouldn't necessarily qualify. But Uber's kind of in a desperate situation. So that's kind of that's an issue. You just start to think about it, and the incentives of a passenger in this case and Uber aren't necessarily aligned because a passenger's incentives are to have a safe ride, for a somewhat reasonable cost, and Uber's incentives are to literally find any driver that they can that can provide a ride, not necessarily thinking too much about safety. It's kind of almost it could almost be like an afterthought. Because it's not an absolute requirement, because of insurance and things like that. So, I think that's a big problem. The other problem I think is with the actual drivers themselves. The incentives aren't aligned there either, because a lot of the drivers are going to be part-time drivers, or especially at this point, because the full-time drivers have all gotten jobs, or anybody who was doing driving before probably got a job. So the part-time drivers really have a conflicting incentive and a conflicting interest to the passenger because it's a side hustle for a part-time driver, and people aren't necessarily going to be super devastated if they lose their side hustle. So the risk of or the penalty of acting not necessarily well for the driver is not that high. So it's kind of an issue. The penalty isn't high, and the risk of driving is still there. So you have a situation where the riders are jumping in the car with people who probably don't necessarily care that much if they lose their job because it's an extra $50 or $100 or whatever a month that they can figure out a way to make some other way. And that creates kind of a misaligned scenario, I think. Now that's different than we're talking about the economy level. So I think in Lyft it's called Lyft Economy, and in Uber I believe it's Uber X. So anything that's separate than that, so I'd say anything up to the black car level would suffer from this problem. But at the black car level, there's different requirements. The driver has to have a TCP license, which is kind of hard to get depending on your market and maintain. And then you have to maintain, as a driver, you have to maintain a commercial insurance policy. So that's also something that, it increases the cost. And, the other thing is a lot of these drivers end up owning their cars, and the TCP cars, the black cars are usually more expensive. So the driver really kind of has a vested interest in making sure they don't get into an accident, or they drive well and they're not, stoned or any of these kind of things. I mean, I've had some Uber X drivers that I almost guarantee that they were stoned, which is terrifying. And I mean, I've gotten out of the car on multiple occasions. I've just said pull over, and I've gotten out. And you start to think about that, and that's just a really bad experience. So I really think this is a problem with the model. As the model starts to scale, it's really kind of going to be hard to find good talent to drive these cars. And really, the answer is autonomy long term. I don't know if that's going to happen in the next, dozen or so years. The alternative maybe is some kind of technology that can supplement the drivers so that the drivers can be more effective. These are like, I have a Subaru, my wife has a Subaru, I should say, an Outback, and they have like these really great driver assist products in there. They have a system that beeps at you when there's a car coming and things that you can't see and stuff like that. If there's sensors like that are added to these cars, that can probably improve safety and kind of take a mediocre driver and make them a good driver. But I really do think there's a limitation to the model, because as the quality starts to decrease, which it should do, eventually, there'll be more accidents, there'll be more issues, there'll be more problems. So, it kind of makes me a skeptic about if this model actually works at scale. And I think people would argue and say that it does, but realistically speaking, it hasn't proven itself yet. They still lose money, and they have issues entering certain markets, and there's all kind of problems, in different areas. So, that's my thought on Uber. Like I said, I mean, maybe I actually chose to do this recording today just because I got into an accident this morning where the driver actually T-boned somebody. So that kind of just reaffirmed my thinking about the issues with Uber. So and ride sharing in general. And that's pretty much it today. Thanks for listening.